My husband died 6 months ago after 48 years of marriage. Cleaning out his office, I found a locked metal box. Inside were baby photos of a little girl I'd never seen, report cards from schools in different states, and a birth certificate with my name as mother and a daughter's name I didn't recognize. Emma Grace, born March 15, 1978. I gave birth to a daughter on that date. The hospital told me she died. My husband held a funeral. I grieved for 45 years. Then I got a message on 23andMe from a woman asking, "Are you my biological mother?" I'm Catherine Morrison, and I'm 70 years old. For 45 years, I've carried the weight of losing a child. The kind of grief that never fully heals, that sits quietly in your chest and surfaces on birthdays that never were, on Mother's Days that should have been different. I had one living child, my son David, and one daughter who I believed died minutes after birth. A daughter I named Sarah, who I held for 3 precious minutes before the nurses took her away, telling me she'd stopped breathing. Except she hadn't stopped breathing. She'd been stolen. And my husband of 48 years, the man I'd trusted with every piece of my heart, had orchestrated the entire thing. Let me take you back to the beginning, to the day I found the locked box that shattered everything I thought I knew about my life. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. Frank died of a stroke on a Tuesday morning in February. One moment he was reading the newspaper, the next he was gone. We'd been married since 1974, raised our son David together, survived the loss of our daughter Sarah, weathered financial hardships and health scares and everything else 48 years of marriage throws at you. I thought I knew everything about Frank. I was wrong. 6 months after his funeral, I finally had the emotional strength to start going through his things. His clothes, his books, his collections. David helped me sort through the obvious items, but Frank's home office was something I needed to handle alone. It was his sacred space, the room where he'd worked for decades as an insurance adjuster. I started with his desk drawers. Office supplies, old tax returns, nothing surprising. Then I moved to his filing cabinets. Insurance policies, investment documents, mortgage papers. All organized exactly as I'd expected. The locked metal box was in the back of his closet, behind a stack of winter coats he'd never wear again. It was about the size of a showbox, grey steel with a combination lock on the front. I'd never seen it before. I tried obvious combinations. Our wedding date. Frank's birthday. David's birthday. Nothing worked. Then, on impulse, I tried March 15, 1978. Sarah's birthday. The lock clicked open. Inside, wrapped carefully in tissue paper, were photographs. Dozens of them. Baby photos, toddler photos, elementary school pictures. A little girl with dark curly hair and Frank's nose. A girl I'd never seen before but who looked hauntingly like David had as a child. Beneath the photos were report cards. Emma Grace Morrison. First grade. Teacher, Mrs. Henderson. School, Riverside Elementary, Portland, Oregon. More report cards from different schools in Oregon, then Washington, then California. Emma's progress through elementary and middle school, documented year by year. At the bottom of the box was a birth certificate. Emma Grace Morrison, born March 15, 1978, at St. Mary's Hospital, Chicago, Illinois. Mother, Catherine and Morrison. Father, Frank James Morrison. I stopped breathing. Emma Grace. Not Sarah. A different name, but the same birth date. The same hospital. My name listed as mother. I'd given birth to a daughter on March 15, 1978. The hospital told me she died. We held a funeral service. A tiny casket. Flowers. A headstone in Oakwood Cemetery that I'd visited every year for 45 years. But here was a box full of evidence that a girl named Emma Grace had lived and grown and gone to schools across 3 states. A girl whose birth certificate named me as her mother. My hands shook as I pulled out my phone and called David. "Mom, what's wrong? You sound terrible." "David, I found something in your father's office. I need you to come over right now." He arrived 20 minutes later. I showed him the box, the photos, the report cards, the birth certificate. Watched his face go from confused to shocked to pale. Mom, who is this? I don't know. But she was born the same day and place as your sister Sarah. And this birth certificate has my name on it. You think this is Sarah? That she didn't actually die? I don't know what to think. But your father had this box hidden in his closet with a lock that opened with Sarah's birthday. David picked up one of the school photos. A girl about 8 years old, gap-toothed smile, holding a science project. She looks like us. Like she could be family. The report cards are from Oregon, Washington, California. Why would your father have report cards from a child in different states? Unless he was tracking her. Or paying for her. We sat in silence, both of us trying to make sense of something that didn't make sense. My daughter had died. I'd held her tiny body. Or had I? The memory was 45 years old, clouded by shock and grief and medication they'd given me afterward. Mom, didn't you do one of those DNA tests last year? For your birthday? I had. David had given me a 23andMe kit as a gift, thinking it would be fun to learn about my ancestry. I'd sent in the saliva sample and gotten results showing I was 63% Irish, 22% English, with some Scandinavian mixed in. I'd looked at the ancestry information but hadn't paid attention to the DNA relatives feature. I did. But I never checked for relatives beyond what it showed me automatically. Check now. If this Emma Grace is really your daughter, and if she's done a DNA test, she might show up as a match. I logged into my 23andMe account on my laptop, my fingers clumsy with nervousness. Clicked on the DNA Relatives tab. The first match that appeared made my heart stop. Close family match, 49.8% DNA shared. Predicted relationship, daughter. Emma G., age 45. I clicked on her profile. Limited information, she'd kept most details private. But there was a message option. And sitting in my message inbox, received 3 weeks ago, was a message I'd never seen because I hadn't been checking the account. Catherine Morrison, the DNA results say you're my mother. But I was adopted as an infant in 1978 and always believed my birth mother died during childbirth. I don't understand these results. If you're really alive, please contact me. This is my phone number, 503-5550147. Emma Grace Wilson, my daughter. Alive. 45 years old. Living in Oregon with the last name Wilson. Adopted. Believing I was dead. David read the message over my shoulder. Oh my God, Mom. She's been alive this whole time. I couldn't speak. Couldn't process it. For 45 years, I'd mourned a child who hadn't died. Who'd been taken from me and given to someone else. Who'd grown up believing I was dead while I'd been grieving her death. You need to call her, David said gently. She's been waiting 3 weeks for a response. I picked up my phone with shaking hands. Dialed the number Emma had left. It rang 3 times before a woman answered. Hello. Is this Emma Grace Wilson? Yes. Who is this? This is Catherine Morrison. You sent me a message on 23andMe about being your mother. The silence lasted so long I thought she'd hung up. Then I heard her breath catch, the sound of someone trying not to cry. You're alive. I've been trying to find information about you for 3 weeks. The adoption agency records said Catherine Morrison died during childbirth in 1978. But the DNA doesn't lie. I'm alive. And I've spent 45 years believing you died minutes after birth. The hospital told me you stopped breathing. My husband arranged a funeral. I've visited your grave every year. There's a grave. At Oakwood Cemetery in Chicago. A headstone that says Sarah Catherine Morrison, March 15, 1978. That's what I named you. Sarah. Not Emma. My adoptive parents named me Emma. They adopted me through a private agency when I was 3 days old. They were told my birth mother died and my birth father couldn't care for me alone. Who told them that? The agency. I have paperwork. Wait, Did you say your husband arranged the funeral?
Yes.
Frank. He died 6 months ago. What was his full name?
Frank James Morrison.
Why? Another long silence. That's the name on my original birth certificate. Listed as my father. Catherine, I think your husband took me and told you I died and gave me to someone else. The room spun. David grabbed my arm to steady me. Why? Why would he do that? I don't know. But I need to meet you. I need to understand what happened. We agreed to meet 3 days later at a coffee shop in Chicago, halfway between where I lived in the suburbs and where Emma was staying at a hotel. 3 days to process the impossible. My daughter was alive. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. I walked into that coffee shop at 2 p.m. on a Saturday and saw her immediately, sitting in the corner booth, watching the door. She had Frank's nose, his eyebrows. But she had my hair, my eyes, the shape of my face. She was me and Frank combined, sitting in a coffee shop 45 years after I'd thought she died. She stood up when she saw me. We stared at each other for a moment that felt frozen in time. Then she whispered, "Mom." And I started crying. 45 years of grief pouring out for a child who'd been alive the whole time. We sat across from each other, this stranger who was my daughter, and tried to piece together the impossible truth. "Tell me about your adoption," I said. "Everything you know." Emma pulled out a folder of documents. My adoptive parents, John and Margaret Wilson, adopted me through a private agency called Family Bridges Adoption Services. According to the paperwork, I was a private placement. They paid $15,000 in fees and expenses. The agency told them my mother died in childbirth and my father was unable to care for me due to financial hardship. That's a lie. I didn't die. And Frank had a good job. We weren't wealthy, but we could have afforded another child. We wanted you. The adoption was finalized in Portland, Oregon, 3 weeks after my birth. My parents moved around a lot for my dad's job: Oregon, Washington, California. I had a good childhood. They loved me. But I always knew I was adopted, and I always wondered about my birth parents. You grew up in Oregon. And Washington and California. Mostly Oregon though. My dad worked in timber management, so we moved where the jobs were. The report cards. The different schools. Frank had been tracking her movements. But how? And why? Emma, did your adoptive parents ever mention the man who arranged the adoption? Not by name. But my mom said once that the birth father had been very involved in making sure I went to a good home. That he'd personally vetted them before agreeing to the adoption. Frank had personally chosen Emma's adoptive parents. Had tracked her progress through school. Had kept photos and report cards in a locked box while letting me grieve a dead child for 45 years. I need to understand why he did this, I said. But Frank's dead. I can't ask him. I can't confront him. I can't demand answers. My adoptive mom is still alive. She's in a memory care facility now, dementia, but she has good days. Maybe she remembers details about the adoption that could help. We drove to the facility together, this daughter I just met and I, trying to fill 45 years of distance with awkward small talk about jobs and families and lives lived separately. Margaret Wilson was 78 years old, small and frail in her memory care room. But when Emma showed her my picture, something clicked. Catherine. Oh my goodness. You're supposed to be dead. I know. That's what you were told. But I'm alive. I need to know about Emma's adoption. About the man who arranged it. Margaret's eyes clouded. Frank. Such a serious man. He came to our house 3 times before the adoption was finalized. Wanted to make sure we were suitable. Wanted references, financial statements, everything. Did he tell you why he was giving up his daughter? He said his wife had died. Said he couldn't raise a baby girl alone with his job. He was very particular about us. Said he needed to know his daughter would be safe and loved. But I didn't die. Why would he tell you that? Margaret looked confused. You died in childbirth. That's what Frank said. That's what all the paperwork said. Emma pulled out the adoption documents. There, in black and white, were statements signed by Frank Morrison declaring that his wife Catherine had died during childbirth due to complications. Notarized. Official. A complete fabrication. Mrs. Wilson, did Frank ever tell you why he chose you specifically? He said we reminded him of his own parents. Good people. Stable. We'd been trying to adopt for 3 years. When Frank contacted the agency saying he had a private placement available, we thought it was a miracle. A miracle. While I'd been home grieving, Frank had been in Oregon engineering an adoption based on elaborate lies. But why? The answer came from an unexpected source, Frank's sister Linda, who I called that evening. Catherine, there's something I need to tell you. Something I should have told you 45 years ago, but Frank swore me to secrecy. What are you talking about? The baby. Sarah. Emma. Whatever her name is. Frank didn't think she was his biological child. The words hit like a physical blow. What? Frank was convinced you'd had an affair. He had no proof, just paranoia. But he was certain that baby wasn't his. So when she was born, he arranged everything. Told the hospital there were complications. Told you she died. Paid off a nurse to falsify records. And arranged a private adoption within days. Linda, I never had an affair. Emma just took a DNA test that proves Frank was her father. He stole our child based on a paranoid delusion. I know. I tried to tell him he was being crazy. But he wouldn't listen. He said he couldn't raise another man's child. That you'd eventually admit the truth. When you never did, he convinced himself you were just a good liar. I thought about 45 years of marriage to a man who'd stolen my child because he couldn't trust me. Who'd let me grieve while our daughter grew up across the country. Who'd kept photos in a locked box, tracking her life while denying me any knowledge she was alive. Did you know where she was? All these years? No. Frank kept that secret. He said it was better if no one knew. I'm so sorry, Catherine. I should have told someone. But I was young and scared and Frank was so convincing. I hung up and told Emma everything. Watched her face crumble as she realized her entire existence had been built on her father's paranoid lie. He gave me away because he thought you cheated. Her voice was small, broken. I'm his biological daughter. The DNA proves it. And he threw me away because of something you didn't even do. I never cheated on Frank. Not once in 48 years. Emma, you were wanted. I wanted you so desperately. I mourned you every day for 45 years. But he didn't want me. He looked at me and saw evidence of a betrayal that never happened. I wasn't worth keeping. No, honey. This wasn't about you. This was about Frank's own insecurity and paranoia. You were innocent. I was innocent. He made a terrible decision based on a delusion. It's been 8 months since that coffee shop meeting. 8 months of learning about the daughter I thought I'd lost. Emma has 2 children of her own, my grandchildren, who I'm slowly getting to know. She's a teacher in Portland, married to a kind man named Robert who's been patient with this bizarre family reunion. We are building something. A relationship 45 years delayed. It's awkward and sometimes painful because we are essentially strangers trying to be mother and daughter. But we are trying. I still visit the grave sometimes. The headstone that says Sarah Catherine Morrison. Not because my daughter is buried there, she's not, but because that grave represents 45 years of unnecessary grief. 45 years I could have spent knowing Emma, watching her grow, being her mother. Frank robbed us of that. Not through death or distance, but through calculated deception based on paranoid fantasy. He died believing he'd done the right thing, never knowing Emma would someday find me through DNA testing and expose his lie. I'm angry at him. I think I'll always be angry. But I'm also grateful for one thing. Frank kept those photos. Kept those report cards. He hid them, yes, but he kept them. which means some part of him couldn't completely let go of the daughter he'd given away. Some part of him, even paranoid and wrong, loved her enough to track her life. It doesn't excuse what he did. Nothing could. But it's something. Emma asked me recently if I could forgive Frank. I don't know. How do you forgive someone for stealing 45 years? For letting you grieve a death that never happened? For denying your child a mother because of his own paranoid delusions? But I also know that staying angry at a dead man doesn't give me back the lost time. It doesn't change what happened. All I can do is move forward with the daughter I have now and try to build something from the wreckage Frank left behind. The 23andMe test was supposed to be a fun birthday gift. Instead, it revealed the biggest lie of my life. But it also gave me back my daughter. And for that, despite everything, I'm grateful. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if Emma hadn't taken that DNA test. If I hadn't taken mine. We'd both still be living with false narratives. Her believing I was dead, me believing she was dead. Two women grieving losses that weren't real. Instead, we have each other. 45 years late, with decades we can never recover, but together nonetheless. Frank's locked box sits in my closet now. I keep it because Emma wanted me to have it. Said it was evidence that some part of her father had loved her, even if he'd loved his paranoia more. I look at those photos sometimes, the daughter I never knew, growing up in pictures I was never meant to see. And I think about how DNA testing is revealing family secrets across the country. How many other people are discovering that their lives were built on lies? How many other locked boxes are hidden in closets, waiting to be opened? My daughter is alive. After 45 years of grief, that's the only truth that matters. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments.